Hey everyone, in this video I'd like to go over creating a shareable node module that you can include amongst your projects to share your brand styles. If you're someone like me who builds websites for multiple websites for a company and you'd like to share the same styles across those, like the same style heading, button, accordion, alert, modal, styles, things like that that you want to keep across your company and carry that brand across, then including styles via a node module is probably the perfect way. Now, I've done this using Ruby on Rails and created a Ruby gem to do this in the past, but I've not done it using NPM. So, being new to JavaScript, I thought I would learn how to do this. So, I've spent a few days this week reading through repositories on GitHub and getting a familiar understanding of how people generally go about doing this. It hasn't been easy, and I've not really found a video on YouTube or online or a tutorial that's walked me through exactly what I wanted to do. So hopefully this video helps you do that as well. So yeah, this video will kind of be a fumble. We'll learn a little bit as we go, but I'll kind of try and remember from memory and a few notes I have on how we can set this up for your, if you'd like to follow along. I will be using style components. This is a fantastic library that Max and Glenn Madden have created, and this allows you to style your React components, visual primitives for the component age. It's a really cool, bold strapline. That allows you to define what type of elements you have on the page, give it a name, and you then export that and can use that as a regular function. But it actually brings along that CSS as well. So it's really powerful, and it's one of the best CSS in JS libraries that I've come across and used. It's really powerful. So it's definitely worth checking out, and we will be using this in our project, so definitely check it out if you're not familiar with it. But you will be able to follow along as well, so don't worry too much. I'm going to create a project called Style by Me. I'm going to create a directory, and I'm going to move into that directory, and then I'm going to run yarn init-y. And that -y just accepts some flags like the name, the version, the license, things like that. We're not really too fussed about right now. So yeah, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to add a few libraries. All of these, in fact, and these are all going to be dev dependencies. So we have the Babel CLI, the Babel core, the Babel loader, the raw loader, the Babel preset ES 2015, the Babel preset stage 2, the preset React, and the Webpack dev server, and a HTML Webpack plugin. And these are dev dependencies within Yarn, and this is something that we just use during development. And when we build our application, it is output just through Babel, and it does all the magic. We have all the Babel loaders and things like that because we're actually going to create a page within our application that displays all of these components, kind of a docs or an examples page. So you can kind of create a corporate page that you can host and share amongst your company, which is one of the things I want to do. So now we've got that set up, we should have a node modules folder, a package.json, and a package.block file. And if we open our text editor, using atom dot or vim dot or whatever you want to do, we then have this folder here. Awesome. So we see that we've got our package.json here. Now these are our dev dependencies, and we are going to rely on style components and React. So we now need to install the React DOM, the React and style components modules. So that's installed, and it adds it to our package.json file. While we're inside of here, we'll get set up creating our scripts and kind of write out the way that we want our application to start. So I like to start my applications with the Webpack dev server, and when we have, we should also have a command for running our docs in production. For now, I am just going to use Webpack production sort of command there, and when we build the project, we want to do that using the Babel directory. So the Babel command, and it'll grab a directory source where we will place all of our code, and the output directory will be dist as well. One other thing, if you're on Mac, or I think this is if it works with bash, but there's also a command called clean, and that will just allow you to do remove recursively that directory, so we'll clear any files. We'll also need to create a command to actually create our distribution build, and we need to do that by running yarn run clean and yarn run build. Cool. So when we run yarn dist, it'll remove the directory and then it will run a directory. And because we're outputting to that directory, it will create that directory and import all of the copy all and import all of the files. So that's pretty cool. That's about it for this file. There is one other thing, which is adding an array of files, and we'll just include dist for now. We don't need to publish our package.js or anything to npm. We literally only need to send across our dist folder for now. You might want to, like I say, include your README and your examples folder, things like that, depending on how you wish to use this. But for now, this is kind of all we need to get going. So let's get started with our webpack config.js file. Webpack is relatively new to me, and it is quite a monster when you're not used to it. But I've kind of got a flow now that I'm used to. So we need to obviously export something here. So the dev tool that I'm using, cheap eval source map, I think it is. It's just a way that tells our logger and the console logger how to source map. It can kind of trace back to the files it's in and kind of pretty print those, I believe. The cheap version, I think it's just a very light version. It doesn't do a lot of the stack trace. I may have that completely wrong, so please don't take that for granted. It's something which, Babel's something which I'm not a wizard at. I haven't used it a lot. Obviously, we have an entry file, so this is where we're going to have our entry file for our system. Next, we then need to create a need to tell Webpack where to place our output file, and that file name will be bundle.js, and this is kind of a common theme amongst Webpack users, is everything's output to a bundle.js file, and that includes our CSS and whatever else, HTML, JSX, things like that. Because in Webpack we're actually going to be importing our module, we actually then need to set an alias on some resolvers for our aliases. So the first one is we're going to call this styled by me, and that's what we're going to import. So if we just remove those hyphens for now, we can use path.join, take in the current directory, and we'll go back a directory, and we will include the source folder. And this is, again, we're just using Webpack in development. So that's quite cool. Module, we need to define some rules for Webpack. The first rule being saying you need to test any files that end in JS. It's kind of a common thing, and obviously we need to exclude the node modules folder. Then we need to tell it what loader to use. And here we're going to use the Babel loader, which is quite nice. We need to use the raw loader. Can't say that word tonight. And again, we are going to, we'll come back to that when we want to look through our JS and JSX files again. We'll come back to the raw loader. It's not really of huge importance right now. We do want to define a new plugin for Webpack. That is define plugin. And this is going to be when we define our node environment within our React, within our build, within our project. We need to stringify the process.env.node.env. So that's great for our production. We'll probably just come back to this and move it over to a Webpack production config file for now, but this is fairly simple, fairly straightforward setup that you may be familiar with if you've done some React code. I'd highly recommend that you use something like Next.js or the Create React app when building a React application. It kind of avoids you writing all of this kind of boilerplate code, and you can kind of get started learning React and and skip this part. But because we're building a custom plugin, I thought I would really strip this down and we'd get started. So let's actually create a file called docs and then entry. And this entry file, we're going to use the docs folder to highlight and show off our components. So we obviously need to import React, and we also need to import the render function from React DOM. We also need to import our app from app, which we're going to include that file. That'll be our index page for our docs. Then we obviously need to render the app, and we're going to use the query selector to grab the app div, and then we'll render that out to the page. So that's quite cool. And if we create another file called index.html, set up some boilerplate styled by me, npm module, docs, give it whatever title you like, entirely up to you. We obviously need to include a div here with an ID of app, and that's where our React application is going to mount. We next need to include our bundle.js file, and it's important that we specify text JavaScript. Now this is in third, so don't worry too much. It's a text JavaScript file. Leave HTML5 just knows that it's that if you include the file name .js with HTML5 here. So don't worry about too much of that. Again, I could be talking rubbish, but I believe that's true. Next is our main application. And now our main application here is the heart of our docs. So obviously need to include the React from React. And we then need to begin importing some files from our styled library. So for us to get going with, I'm just going to call this heading 1 or H1 from styled by me. Now this obviously hasn't been imported or added via yarn to our package.json file. It's something that we obviously set as an alias, styled by me, and that is just saying styled by me belongs to our application, our plugin that we're actually creating, which is going to be in the source directory that we'll create in a moment. So we have that, and we can then, if we create a const called app, we can just export a new app. And for now, we will just use hello world. And then at the bottom of this, we'll export that as a default. And this H1 is going to be our custom import here. There's one thing that you need to be clear of that could be quite easy to mistake here, is if you make this a lowercase h1, it'll think that as regular HTML, and that's kind of how React and JSX works. Anything that's lowercase, it assumes is an HTML element. If you make it uppercase, the first letter, it assumes it's a React component, a React import. So be careful with that as well, because that can trip you up. So with that, I'm just going to comment these out for now because we actually haven't built this library. And what I like to do now is, now we've got our docs set up with Webpack and we've got our HTML running and our everything else, let's just run yarn start. And that yarn start, if we look in our package.json, is going to run the Webpack dev server. And that kind of brings along its own sensible defaults. So that'll spin up a server using Webpack and output our HTML. Now the first thing you'll see in the console is it's kind of confused about this weird looking syntax that is JSX. So what we need to do, because we imported some Babel config and presets from earlier, we now need to create a Babel RC folder. And inside of here, we need to include some presets to Babel. Now, if we have a look at our package.json, we will see we have Babel core preset ES 2015. So we'll add ES 2015 here, and stage 2, and eventually React as well. So that is these three components, three modules here that we'll import. And if we restart this, we should see that everything is compiling successfully, which is great. So that's looking good. If we pop over to our browser and go to localhost port 8080, we should see we have a file there. That's our docs. I believe I'm missing something. I'm not too sure what just yet. We load our docs for now. Load here. I'd like to make that the default. How do we do that? So I've built the server. It's building the chunks. It's going through everything. It's running through our node modules. I think that is it. Yeah. Yeah. One thing, I'd like that to appear, the docs to be the default. Webpack, where are you? Okay. Dev server. We need to specify a dev server and say our content base is /docs or docs /. And then if we just stop that using Control-C and run yarn start again, what we now should see is if we remove this /docs, it should automatically be there. So we can see we have our style by me title that we created. So that's cool. That's working. It's including this bundle. If we open up that bundle.js file, we should see that there's not really a big deal in here. Because we've included React and specified a few things, that's pretty much all it's piping out right now. So yeah, there's really nothing to be shown on the page here because we don't have anything. But if we open our text editor and we pop over here, and for now, if we add in a lowercase h1 tag and just say hello world, go back to our browser, we should see hello world. So we can see that React is working perfectly fine with Babel and Webpack running. So that's really awesome. We're really getting somewhere and really can get started now. So we'll need to create this library and we need to create an h1 tag. And I figured the best way to do this is to create a folder called source and an index.js that exports all of our components from our plugin that we're going to create now. So let's get started doing that. And first of all, you will want to, I'm just going to export h1 from our components typography component. And that is something that we will do now. So we will create a folder called components and we'll call that typography, and that's good. We need to import style components, so we assign it to a variable called constants, called styled, that is style components. And here, what we can do is define that h1 to be a new styled h1. And using style components, we can say the font size is 30 pixels and the color is red. And that red could be your brand color. The font size could be the particular font size you use for h1. And if you include it, it becomes the same font color and size across all of your applications, which is really, really handy. So we've got this file created and running fine. So that's great. If we pop over to our app, now if we import h1 and print that on the page, you should see that everything is working. Or so it should be. Let's just stop Webpack, run yarn start. And can't resolve styled by me. Let's check Webpack. Okay. We are actually in a folder where the root and so is source. So that's the problem there. If we run yarn start again, we should see that that will work fine. So that's just a little mistake there. If we pop over to our browser, we should then see we have red text and that font size is in fact 30 pixels. Brilliant. So we've created a component that we can now use amongst all of our applications. So we can maybe just expand this a little bit more. And this is really easy. Once you kind of come up with a structure for your folders, and what I like to do here is just create a folder for our components, which I have here. So if we wanted to create a new constant called h2, we could take that h1 and use the with component function that style components gives you, and then just use extend. The with component will allow you to change the tag that it is. So we've got h1 set here, but we actually want to use h2 instead. So we can then set font size to be 24 pixels, and we want the color to be red as well. Now if we export another const called h3, we can use h1 or h2 as the base. It's entirely up to you. And then with component h3, also extend that as well and create a new font size of 18 pixels. Now one other thing, just for example, we could do h4, and that is h1 with component h4 extend, and we can then set a font size of 15, and now we can change the color to green. So we've got that color set there as well. Now once we've created these, because these are just exporting from this file, they're not going anywhere, we need to tell our package to export these files as well. We then have to include and export them from here, and this is what this handy little function does right here. Then in our docs app, we can again import h2, h3, h4, and we can then look to use world heading 3 and h4 heading 4. We'll just change those so we can tell what is what in our docs browser, and if we load that up we should see that that's red, that's red, that's red, and the h4 is green, and it's bringing into account our colors as well and font sizes. So that's really, really cool. This is really something that we can start sharing amongst our different applications that we create. So if I wanted to, I could publish this now to npm, and then I could import that from our new projects as well if we use Create React App or Next.js. And I'll probably do that in part 2, set up a new application, publish this to npm and get that running. But I think that's pretty much an intro of how I would structure a shared node module for your styles and your company style guide. There's just not a huge amount that I could really now show you. It's kind of down to you at this point to go ahead and create further components. We could create a folder here for this could be button, and we could do the same, import styled from styled components, and we could export default styled dot button, and then we could say the background of our button is red as well, because that red is our brand color. It's so bright and vibrant. It's certainly a color that most brands love. Border radius, we could set a border radius here. Our company loves big border radiuses, so we set that there, and certainly we don't want any borders on that as well. We just want a really nice round button. So that's what I would do here. Export default styled button, and that is that there. Again, we will then pop into index.js, and because I exported that as a default, what you now need to do with this, using the Babel preset stage 2, you are allowed to do export default as button, and that will come from the components folder and that button as well. So that will just return button, and that means we can include it in our node modules. If this looks unfamiliar to you, this is just some I think it's ES 2017 or 2016 exporting. Not too sure what part of the spec that's in, but it's kind of new. It's new to me as well. I was a bit freaked out when I first seen this. Certainly this part, sorry, export. You're kind of importing and exporting just using the export command, which is really nice and neat and helpful. Now in our application, we can then in here use import that button, and we then need to use button hello world, and then that will work as well. So we've got that button there, and if we inspect it, you'll see that we have a regular button tag there. And this works as a regular button as well. If you're used to style components, you can say let's make this a submit type button, and if we inspect it now, we should see that the type is submit. So that's really cool, really awesome. I really like this setup, and it's something that we can certainly work on. Because we've got Babel set up in our package JSON, we're now in a position where we can distribute it to npm. So I'll do that in the next video using the dist command. But what you essentially will be able to do is just run yarn dist, and that will create that directory, create the dist directory here, and it converts all of this for you using Babel, and brings across all of our components as well in a really nice way that we can start importing from our other applications. So that's what we'll learn to do in the next episode. We'll publish it to npm and import it in a new Create React app as well. So that's really cool. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this has been somewhat helpful. This was a really scary thing for me at first. I wasn't sure how to best approach this, but I think I've got something here that I can work with. It might not be fantastic, so if you know of a way that I can improve it, I'd certainly love to know, because I like to write as little as code as possible. It's far easier to maintain and build on, and if there's a better way that you would go around structuring this, or creating the docs or the Webpack config, things like that, please let me know in the comments. It's much appreciated. I'm very new to Webpack, so that would help a lot. So yeah, have a great day. Happy coding. Enjoy. I'll bring part 2 in a few days, but have a good one. Happy coding.